Dear Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, by now, people across the globe have seen the pictures of you dressed as Aladdin. Your hands and face were painted brown. I have to admit I was a little bit disappointed. Disappointed because you're the son of a Prime Minister, the very Prime Minister who touted multiculturalism. You were also a teacher and educator, someone who should have known that depictions of Aladdin would be considered offensive to Muslims and Arabs. This was also 20 years ago. Brownface and blackface had been denounced as racism many, many years before that. At the same time, all sorts of people make mistakes. Even the most well-meaning, well-educated, well-informed individuals, people who care about eradicating racism and making the world a better place, even those individuals mess up sometimes. We all have our blind spots. And in fact, it seems like the bigger you are, the bigger your blind spots are as well. As you've said yourself, privilege blinded you to the impact of your actions on others. You came from a well-to-do family, you were frolicking in the corridors of power, you interacted with people who had influence. It's likely that your circles were not very diverse. And you didn't have to engage with other people because you could have survived and thrived and succeeded without engaging very deeply with people who are very different from yourself. The problem with people who are in positions of power is that their blind spots can actually perpetuate oppression against others. Blackface or brownface, those are blatant forms of racism. But there are other forms of racism that are much more insidious. And I'm talking about structural racism, which persists in Canada. You know, if someone in a position of privilege is wearing a costume that plays upon the stereotypes that are associated with your community, and you're a marginalized community, what sort of message does that send to the individual who's being mimicked? The message to me is that that individual is not important, not of value, doesn't matter as much, and can be used for the sake of entertainment, of fun, and perhaps even of mockery. The problem is, some of our laws, our policies, our norms in Canada perpetuate that very idea. Let me give you two examples of how they do that. The first example has to do with religious minorities in Quebec. Quebec has decided that religious minorities cannot wear their kippas, their turbans, their headscarves while working. And this has resulted in the loss of livelihood of many people, teachers included. It has also resulted in people not being able to interact with people who are different from themselves and to learn from them and understand them better. All of the political leaders have said they're not going to do anything about this in the interests of maintaining a good relationship with Quebec. But what about all those individuals who don't have their religious rights protected? Are they disposable? Another example, Indigenous communities and clean water. There are many Indigenous communities that don't have clean drinking water in their homes. How is this possible? Your government has promised that by 2021 they will have clean drinking water, but not enough progress is being made. So it's very unlikely that by that time that promise will be kept. This should be a national emergency. Political leaders of all stripes should be talking about this, but no one is. So the question is, are people who are different, are people who are Indigenous, Black, racialized, do they have the same worth as other people? Or can their well-being, can their lives, in fact, be sacrificed for larger political goals? So my message to you, Prime Minister, is that you need to do better. There are three things that I think that you as a political leader could do. The first thing you can do is that you can engage in a continual process of trying to understand the biases and assumptions that are being made of people who are different from yourselves, Black, racialized, and Indigenous individuals and communities. And then try to look at what impact they might have had on the laws and policies and norms in our society. The second thing you can do is make a plan. Work towards a plan with all forms of government to eradicate the harms that are associated with structural racism. The third thing you can do is that you can engage with people who are different from yourself, and you can find a way to make space for them and share spaces of power. We need more Black, racialized, and Indigenous people in all levels of government and in politics, not just in politics, but also in the media as well. You know, when we think of somebody painting their face black or brown, painting their hands, that's a pretty long process. And the end result is that the person looks like a caricature. They don't appeal to the people that they're trying to mimic. In fact, they look kind of repulsive. Based on that, I think we should reflect on the fact that it's difficult enough to dress in the same way as someone. Think about how hard it is to understand what's going on in their minds. What are the difficulties they're experiencing and what is their lived reality? And moreover, we should reflect on the fact that it's extremely difficult for politicians to speak and act on behalf of people that they don't really know or understand, and people who are not in the same room, not at the table. So my message to you, Prime Minister, is that you need to do better. On behalf of all of the people whose lived reality is racism, exclusion, marginalization, we expect better of you. I know that I and many others are looking to you and waiting with bated breaths to see what your plan is to eradicate systemic racism in Canada. Sincerely, Safiyyah Ally.